This is the Open University.
This is not the real Open University. This is the Momus Open University. A synthetic Open University. A random series of talks by Momus, the gaunt minstrel of modern angst.
Do I dance the dance, or does the dance dance me? Do I wear the clothes, or do the clothes wear me? Do I think the city, or does the city think me? This is the False Open University, and I'm thinking about my photographs again, so turn off now if you don't want to see a slideshow of my photographs. I'm thinking about the transition I made from Paris to Berlin, from the west of Europe to the east of Europe, and also from winter to spring. It's also a transition from one ethnic minority to another, from the sapeurs of Paris to the Turks of Berlin. This guy I photographed on the street in Le Marais. He is a sapeur in a bowler hat. And the sapeurs, it stands for Société des Ambianceurs et des Personnes Élégantes, S-A-P-E, SAP is an acronym. And it's really came up in the 60s from Brazzaville and Kinshasa, which are cities in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So this guy, he looks to be about my age, with his sort of walrus moustache and his very natty little bag and bowler hat. And a bit less kind of spivvy than some of the other sapeurs that you might see up at the Chateau Rouge kind of area of Paris. And his sunglasses are kind of a nice touch. One of the things I was talking about last year in these talks was when I was in Seoul, thinking about how Paris was represented in Seoul and how Seoul was represented in Paris, and also with London, because there was a Hockney exhibition looking at 60s London in the Dong Diamond Design Plaza. So that fascinates me, just how there's a different flavour of each city in each other city. There's a kind of companionship of cities, or a kind of chemistry between them. So it's just a collaboration between a cafe and a select shop in Seoul, near Seoul Forest, called Useful Atelier, and Recto Verso, which is a cafe in Paris run by a couple of gay guys from, I think, Portugal or Spain, again in the Marais. And this was a bag they made, and they also made these sunglasses. So when you transition between one place and another, you often use a kind of sticking plaster in the form of a fantasy from a third place, another place. So in my case, this time it was this novel, very short novel, more like a short story, called The Hole by Hiroko Oyamada. No relation to Keigo Oyamada, as far as I know. Actually, in terms of the artistic relationship, it's more to Kobo Abe, who, of course, wrote The Woman in the Dunes and was known as the Japanese Kafka. So this is about a woman who has to move to the suburbs with her husband to live in a family-owned house, her husband's family's house. And she follows one day. She's got this boring suburban life. She doesn't have access to a car. There's not much else in the suburb she's living in. She falls into a hole by the riverbank, having followed this weird black animal, which is like a dog-sized raccoon or something. And then she starts meeting this guy who claims to be the brother of her husband, who lives in a shed in the back garden. She gets a job at the 7-Eleven as an old grandfather who also falls into a hole. It's sort of entertaining in a Kafkaesque way. And I was just attracted by the cover. I liked the typography on the cover when I saw it in Le Bon Marché in Paris. But was a good sticking plaster for the whole of the transition between Paris and Berlin. So I wanted to use this photograph of an Archie Shepp record in Hark, which is a record shop in sort of Le Père Lachaise area of Paris, to make a contrast between that fantastic shop, Hark, and a very disappointing shop in Berlin, which is the new Rough Trade store, which is just like 10 minutes walk from my place in Neukölln. It's on the Karl-Marx-Straße. And I found it deeply underwhelming. I was kind of excited because it was one of the new things that Berlin is offering now, a branch of Rough Trade. But it's made such a horrible contrast to the Rough Trade I remember as a record store in the 80s, the 70s and the 80s, when it was, a cornucopia of exciting, exotic, bizarre, left-field underground releases, all for, a few quid, a couple of quid. Now, it's, in Berlin anyway, it's a kind of sadly formatted kind of, almost like the Virgin Megastore before that went out of business, sort of very industrial space with, as far as I could see, there were three different, there were hundreds of categories, but three different ways to say the same old vinyl records from the last 40, 50 years, repressed. And that, they had a category called retro, they had a category called essentials, and they had a category called classics. But basically the whole shop is just classics. There's a very small second-hand section, but it's basically just €35 LPs, much less interesting than what you might find in a flea market in terms of vinyl, in terms of selection. It's just the sort of the canon. It really is evidence of the death of that whole culture, when things are so sclerotic and so canonized that you can't find anything interesting anymore. It's absolutely the opposite of what the Rough Trade shop experience used to be. And there are still good vinyl stores like Hark where, that Archie Shepp record was pretty expensive. It was probably €60 or something like that for the vinyl. But, at least there were still surprises, and there was still a kind of good curation going on in Hark, which I didn't see at all in Rough Trade Berlin. So a few days after the disappointment of the Berlin Rough Trade shop, I was walking on Weserstrasse in Neukölln, and I saw this gallery, it's a public residency space called Agit, and they had up in the window a big sign saying, "For how much longer do we tolerate mass murder?" And I kind of liked that, and I thought, because it's a reference to the pop group's album of the same title, Mark Stewart, the late Mark Stewart, his spirit, the original Rough Trade spirit was much more like the pop group who I saw live in about 1978, than it is anything like what they now call the Rough Trade store. Since we're in 1978, before we leave Paris entirely, this is a jewellery case in Agnès B fashion store in Paris on the Rue de Marseille, and it's David Bowie in his stage concert 1978 Isolar 2, the first time I saw Bowie live. And I noticed that Agnès B is, I don't know if she's got permission from the Bowie estate, but she's got flashes, Aladdin Sane type flashes, and she's got the letter B as jewellery, playing on her own name. Of course, Agnès B is just the letter B, and Bowie is presumably signified also by the letter B. So I always take trains when I go between Paris and Berlin, and I need a kind of decompression chamber. I can't really hack the whole 8 hours or 9 hours train, especially with the German trains, which always make you miss your connections. They're always late. So I stay over in Frankfurt, and I saw a couple of exhibitions. This time, Struwwelpeter exhibition in the Struwwelpeter Museum. I'm sort of weirdly obsessed with Struwwelpeter and that vision of naughty children in the 19th century. And Cosima von Bonin exhibition, which was kind of fun, cute, kind of kitschy imagery, using a lot of sort of early 20th century cartoon type images. So the big event as soon as I arrived in Berlin was the gallery weekend, and I dutifully made a Google Maps list of all the galleries in Mitte and Charlottenburg, all over the city. They tend to be in little clusters anyway, and I took my bicycle, put some air in the tires, and cycled, over this massively spread out city. Compared with Paris, it's 8 times the size of Paris, and you really feel it. It takes a long time to get, even on a bicycle, from one end of the town to the other. But I really enjoyed it. The weather was beautiful and there were interesting things. I mean, take it and leave it. There's a lot of rubbish as well, but some interesting stuff. And a few days later, I was in a cafe bonanza in Kreuzberg, and some people came and sat down next to me, and they started grousing and bitching about the gallery weekend. They'd been to all the same shows I'd been to, in the Potsdamer Strasse and all the rest of it. But they were saying, the Charlotten stuff was unbearable, and it made me think of this film, The Purge. I thought, what is this film, The Purge? But actually, the guy was talking about a film called The Purge, where one day a year you get to commit any crime you want and murder people. So he said, all those people in the galleries, I just wanted to shoot them all. They were so precious and pretentious. And I was about to interrupt. I was really tempted to say, listen, I was one of those people and I enjoyed those shows, so what's your issue? So between mid-April and now, it's really felt like a transition of seasons, because the first couple of days, it was grim, it was grey, it was freezing inside my apartment, and I was thinking, why do I even keep this place? It's just a storage space really for my books, and I'm not even here most of the time. But then the weather changed and there was some really warm, it was like almost 30 degrees, and it was like a whole solid week of sunny days and fantastic. So suddenly the summer was here and everyone was down by the canal and out in the parks and or looking at the galleries or whatever. And so I really changed my whole attitude, and I started visiting all the old places I used to live in Berlin, on the Sanderstrasse, in Neukölln, but also before that in Friedrichshain, so on the Karl Marx Allee and those big Stalin buildings. And it kind of had a really nice feeling, a nice wistful kind of feeling, and I really remembered why I keep this apartment and why I live here. And my girlfriend's going to come and join me here, so we're going to have a sort of slightly Berlin-y summer, or certainly a few weeks. I think I'm meant to be playing a show in Poland. It's not entirely confirmed yet, but this will be the first, if it does happen, be my first show, live show as Momus since 2019 actually. I think I played in Barcelona. That was the last concert I played. And I'm sort of edging my way back in, but these people in Poland seem nice. I think it's in a forest outside Krakow somewhere. So let's see if that goes ahead. And I have anxiety dreams about forgetting my lyrics and doing terrible kind of zonked out music and nothing working and people drifting away from the stage and all the rest of it. But presumably it won't be like that. It'll be good. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Open University.
Open University.
This is not the real Open University. This is the Momus Open University. A synthetic Open University. A random series of talks by Momus, the gaunt minstrel of modern Anglia.